The brown leather shoes sat on the nightstand like a question Martin Luther King Jr. couldn't answer. Atlanta, late evening, 1965. The Lorraine Motel room was dim, quiet except for sirens somewhere distant. He'd been alone for hours. The shoes were child-sized, scuffed beyond repair, stitching loose at the sole. Too worn for their age. He picked them up slowly, studying them in the weak light. Inside one shoe, tucked beneath the insole, was a folded note. He gave these away. No signature. No return address. No explanation. Outside his window, shouting rose and fell like a tide. He turned the shoes over in his hands. They still smelled like rain and blood. He remembered a face. A boy, young, standing in Montgomery with bare feet. But he couldn't place when the phone rang. He didn't answer. The shoes sat heavy in his palms, heavier than they should be. Someone had sent them. Someone wanted him to remember. But remember what? He set them down carefully, as though they might break. These shoes, he realized, contained a secret that had been haunting him for months. And what he was about to discover would defy everything. Montgomery, March 1965. Martin Luther King Jr. was at the peak of his power and the center of his nightmare. Nobel laureate, national figure, under FBI surveillance 24 hours a day. The public knew the speeches, the marches, the arrests. They didn't know the weight. Every night in church basements, he reviewed protest plans with his advisors. Every morning, he woke to reports of injuries, broken bones, concussions, children hospitalized. Because parents sent their kids to the front lines. They believed it was necessary. Maybe it was. But MLK carried the guilt. He saw their faces in the emergency rooms, heard their nightmares when they came back to church. 9-year-olds with scars, 12-year-olds who flinched at sirens. His advisors debated endlessly. Let the children march or forbid it. Protect them or use them. MLK sat silent through those debates, his jaw tight. He didn't have an answer. He had a Bible and a Nobel Prize and 100 death threats in a file cabinet. And tomorrow he would witness something that made the whole debate irrelevant. Morning came cold and bright. The march formed outside Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. Police blockades stretched across 3 intersections. Officers in riot gear stood shoulder to shoulder, batons ready. And then MLK saw him, a boy, maybe 8 years old, walking toward the police line alone. He wore brown leather shoes, way too big for him, stuffed with newspaper to make them fit. No parents visible, no adults nearby. Just the boy, walking steady and calm like he'd done this 100 times. MLK signaled to an aide, "Get that child out of here." But before the aide could move, the police charged. Water cannons erupted. The spray hit like a fist. The boy went down hard, tumbling across the wet pavement. His shoes flew off, landing 10 feet away. The crowd scattered, screaming. But the boy stayed down, crying, barefoot. MLK rushed forward. Officers grabbed him, twisted his arms behind his back. Handcuffs snapped on. He struggled, shouting, but they dragged him toward the squad car. And that's when he saw what happened next. An adult protester, a woman in her 40s, was crawling on the pavement, bleeding from her head. She'd been hit by the spray, slammed into a street sign. Her shoes were gone, ripped off in the chaos. She was crying, trying to stand, slipping. Time. 0.5s. The boy saw her. He stopped crying. He stood up barefoot and walked straight to his shoes lying in the water. He picked them up, walked over to the woman, and placed them beside her bleeding feet. "You need them more," he said. Then he turned and walked away, feet already bleeding from the rough pavement. MLK, handcuffed, being shoved into the squad car, watched the whole thing. He tried to speak. No words came. The officers pushed him inside. The door slammed. As the car pulled away, MLK craned his neck, desperate to keep the boy in sight. But the crowd swallowed him. Gone. At the station, fingerprints, mugshot, cell, MLK sat on a concrete bench and couldn't stop seeing it. Time 0.5's, tiny shoes, bleeding feet, a child's face. That night, after posting bail, his first words to his aides were, "Find the boy with no shoes." MLK assigned Reverend Ralph Abernathy to lead the search. The Southern Christian Leadership Conference had resources, volunteers, connections across Montgomery. They should have been able to find one 8-year-old boy. Week 1, they canvassed every neighborhood near the church, knocked on doors, asked at schools, shelters, clinics. Nobody claimed to know him. One witness, a shopkeeper, said, "I saw a boy like that near the bus station last month. Looked lost. False lead. Wrong child." The days stacked up. MLK grew obsessed. Time 0.5's. His aides didn't understand. "Why does one boy matter?" someone asked him. MLK looked up from the files on his desk. "Because he understood something I don't." They kept searching. Churches checked their rosters. Schools checked attendance records. Nothing. And then the FBI noticed. An agent named Sullivan, assigned to monitor MLK's activities, logged the search efforts in his report. Subject seeking unidentified minor, purpose unknown, surveillance continuing. The file grew thicker. Meanwhile, MLK couldn't let it go. Every night he thought about those shoes. Every morning he asked his staff, "Any word?" The answer was always no. Until 2 weeks later, when a second envelope arrived at his Atlanta office. No return address. Inside, 3 photographs. All showed the same boy at different protests. One from February, one from January, one from December. The boy was always in the frame, always wearing the same oversized brown shoes. And the photos were professional quality. Sharp focus, perfect angles, surveillance photos. Someone had been watching the boy long before MLK ever noticed him. Someone had been tracking his movements, documenting his presence. MLK stared at the photos spread across his desk. Who sent these? And why? MLK studied the photographs like a detective. In one shot, you could see a bus number in the background. Route 47, time 0.5's. An aide traced the route, found the neighborhood, a poor section of Montgomery, mostly black families, small houses with chain-link fences. They went door to door again. This time, an elderly woman answered on the 3rd Street. "I know that boy," she said. "Lives with his grandmother 2 blocks over." They found the house. Empty. Foreclosed sign in the window. A neighbor leaned over the fence. "Grandmother died 3 weeks ago," the woman said. "Heart attack. Boy went into the system. Foster care. The records were sealed, children protected by the state. MLK hit a legal wall. He made calls. Lawyers tried to intervene. The state refused to release any information. Privacy laws, they said. But MLK knew better. The timing was too convenient. He pushed harder. That's when the 3rd envelope arrived. This one had a note inside, handwritten in neat cursive. "Boy is safe. Shoes were his father's. His father's shoes? The boy was 8. Those shoes fit an adult woman. MLK dug deeper. He found the father's name in old SCLC records, Thomas Reed, registered as a volunteer in 1963, marched twice in Selma, then killed by an off-duty police officer during a protest. No charges filed. Ruled an accident. The boy, Marcus Reed, had witnessed it. His mother abandoned him after Thomas died, couldn't handle the grief. The grandmother took Marcus in. And those shoes, Thomas Reed's only possession Marcus kept, he wore them everywhere, stuffed with newspaper, too big, but the last physical connection to his father. And Marcus gave them away. To save a stranger. MLK sat in his office reading the file on Thomas Reed. Volunteer. Father. Protester. Dead at 32. The circumstances were brutal. Shoved by an officer during a march, hit his head on a curb, never woke up. The officer claimed self-defense. No witnesses came forward. The case closed in a week. Thomas's widow, Marcus's mother, left town 2 months later. Time 0.5s disappeared. The grandmother, Clara Reed, took Marcus in. She was 70 years old, living on a pension, but she raised him. And here's the part that made MLK's hands shake. Clara brought Marcus to every protest. Not recklessly, intentionally. She wanted him to see the work his father died for. She wanted him to finish it. MLK found people who knew her. Clara was fierce, one woman said. She believed that boy carried his father's spirit. Clara Reed died the night before Marcus gave away the shoes. Heart attack in her sleep. Marcus woke up, found her, called an ambulance. Too late. Social services took him that morning. By afternoon, he was in a foster's home. By evening, he was at the march. No parents, no guardian, just a boy in his dead father's shoes. And when the moment came, when he saw that woman bleeding on the ground, he didn't hesitate. He gave away the last piece of his father he had left. Because that's what Thomas would have done. MLK closed the file. He understood now. This wasn't about one boy. It was about what children inherit. Pain, courage, sacrifice. Marcus inherited his father's shoes and his father's fight. And when the time came, he made the choice his father would have made. A third envelope arrived the next day. This time, it contained an address. The address led to a state-run foster home 40 miles outside Montgomery. MLK drove there alone, unannounced. The building was institutional, concrete, narrow windows, chain-link fence around a patchy yard. Inside, the air smelled like bleach and overcooked food. A staff member met him at the front desk. "You can't just visit," she said. MLK straightened his tie. "I'm his pastor." It was a lie, but it worked. She led him to a common room where a dozen kids sat on worn furniture, watching a black and white TV. Marcus was in the corner, sitting alone, barefoot, wearing donated clothes that didn't fit. MLK sat beside him. Neither spoke for a long minute. Finally, MLK said, "Why did you give them away?" Marcus didn't look at him. "She needed them. I didn't. They were your father's. He would have wanted her to have them." His voice was flat. No tears. No emotion. Just fact. MLK studied the boy's face. He expected grief, maybe anger. Instead, he saw something else. Calm. Acceptance. A kind of maturity that didn't belong in an 8-year-old. "Where will you go?" MLK asked. Marcus shrugged. "Don't know. Don't matter." MLK saw himself in that moment. The same resignation. The same weight. a child carrying the burden of a movement he didn't choose but couldn't escape. What if I could help? MLK said. Time 0.5s. Marcus finally looked at him. You can't. Why not? Because you got bigger things to worry about. Marcus turned back to the TV. The conversation was over. But as MLK stood to leave, he made a decision. A dangerous one. A decision that would risk everything he'd built. He was going to adopt Marcus Reed. Back in Atlanta, MLK told his inner circle, "I'm adopting the boy." The room exploded. Advisors shouted over each other. Ralph Abernathy, "You can't be serious." Andrew Young, "The optics alone." Coretta, his wife, stood in the doorway. "We have 4 children already, Martin." "I know. The FBI is already watching us. You adopt a protester's orphan, they'll use it against you. They'll use everything against me anyway." But it wasn't just the FBI. The legal process was a nightmare. Applications, home visits, background checks, interviews with social workers who asked invasive questions about finances, schedule, stability. Weeks passed. The state delayed again and again. No explanations, just delays. MLK suspected interference. He was right. FBI agent Sullivan contacted the Alabama State Board privately. Subject unsuitable as guardian, the memo read. Association with known agitators, under federal investigation, child welfare at risk. The adoption was blocked. No official reason given. MLK appealed. Denied. He appealed again. Denied again. Marcus stayed in the system. All MLK could do was visit once a month, the maximum allowed for non-family. Each visit, Marcus seemed further away, more withdrawn, more resigned. The other kids in the home talked. Marcus didn't. He sat in the corner, barefoot, staring at nothing. MLK brought him books. Marcus didn't read them. He brought him new shoes. Marcus left them in the box. "Don't need them," he said. The 4th month, another envelope arrived at MLK's office. No note this time. Time 0.5s. Just the shoes. The brown leather shoes Marcus had given away. Someone had returned them. And tucked inside was a folded piece of paper with an address and a name. Helen Crawford. Helen Crawford lived in a small house on the south side of Montgomery. MLK knocked on her door on a Saturday morning. She answered slowly, leaning on a cane. Her head was wrapped in a bandage. She recognized him immediately. "Dr. King," she said, surprised. "I've been expecting you." She led him inside. The house was clean, modest, filled with the smell of coffee. She sat him down at the kitchen table and poured 2 cups. "Marcus sent me a letter from the foster home," she said. "Asked me to return. The shoes to you." "Why?" "He said you'd know what to do with them." MLK looked at the shoes sitting on the table between them. Helen continued. "I tried to keep them, felt wrong to give them back, but the boy insisted, wrote me twice. 'Dr. King needs to remember,' he said." "Remember what?" "That's what I asked." He wrote back, "My father gave his life. I gave his shoes. That's how it works." MLK felt something crack open in his chest. An 8-year-old boy in a foster home with nothing left, teaching him about sacrifice. Not asking for help. Not begging for rescue. Just teaching. Helen leaned forward. "What are you going to do?" MLK picked up the shoes. "I'm going to tell his story." MLK called a press conference. April 1965. Reporters packed the room. He stood at the podium with the brown leather shoes on the table beside him. "I want to tell you about a boy," he began. He didn't use Marcus's name. Privacy laws protected that. But he told the story. The father killed in protest, the boy who inherited his shoes, the moment on the street when Marcus gave them away. This child understood sacrifice better than most adults I know, MLK said. He gave away his father's memory to save a stranger's feet. The story spread. Newspapers printed it. Radio stations read it. Churches repeated it in sermons. National attention turned to the foster system, to the failures, to the children left behind. Donations flooded in, money, supplies, offers to help. The Alabama governor was forced to respond. And then something unexpected. An anonymous donor stepped forward, offered to cover Marcus's care and education until adulthood. No name, no publicity, just money. Speculation swirled. Wealthy supporter, guilty politician, someone moved by the story. Nobody knew. The state, under pressure, suddenly approved MLK's adoption application. After months of delays, suddenly it was fast-tracked. But by then, Marcus had already been placed with another family. A local couple. Stable. Loving. Good people. MLK met the family in May. They lived in a quiet neighborhood, had 2 other kids, treated Marcus like their own. Marcus smiled when MLK walked in. Actually smiled. It was the first time MLK had seen it. "You look good," MLK said. Marcus nodded. "They're good people. You need anything?" "No, sir, I'm okay." They sat in the living room while the parents made lemonade in the kitchen. MLK pulled the shoes from his bag. "I kept them," he said. Marcus looked at them, then at MLK. "Good. I want to do something with them, something that matters, but I don't know what." Marcus thought for a moment. "Remind people." Remind them of what? That it's not about the big stuff. It's about what you give when you got nothing left. MLK held the shoes in his lap. Marcus was right. He'd been fighting for laws, for justice, for systems. But this boy understood something simpler and harder. Sacrifice isn't about what you can afford to give. It's about giving anyway. "Can I keep them?" MLK asked. Marcus nodded. "Only if you do something with them." 3 months later, MLK stood in a pulpit in Atlanta with the shoes beside his Bible. And he told the story to a room full of people who would never forget it. April 1968. Memphis, Tennessee. The sanitation workers strike. MLK checked into the Lorraine Motel, room 306. He was exhausted. The movement was fracturing. Younger activists wanted violence. The FBI wanted him destroyed. And somewhere in Alabama, Marcus Reed was 11 years old, thriving with his adoptive family. MLK unpacked his briefcase that night. Inside, wrapped in cloth, the brown leather shoes. He always traveled with them. He studied them under the lamp, traced the worn stitching with his finger. He thought about Marcus, about Thomas, about sacrifice. He wrote a note on hotel stationery. "These belong in a museum someday. Keep them safe. MLK." He sealed the shoes in a package, addressed it to the SCLC office in Atlanta. The next morning, April 4th, he never got a chance to mail it. At 6:01 p.m., on the balcony outside room 306, Martin Luther King Jr. was shot. The shoes were still inside, in his briefcase, waiting. The package was delivered as instructed. Coretta King received it weeks later. She opened it, found the shoes, read the note. She cried. The shoes were placed in the King family's private collection, protected, preserved. Decades passed. Marcus Reed grew up, became a teacher, lived quietly. He never sought fame, never wanted it. In 2015, a journalist found him. He was 58 by then, gray-haired, still living in Alabama. "What do you remember about that day?" the journalist asked. Marcus smiled. "I just gave away some shoes. Dr. King made it matter. Time 0.5s. The shoes are in the National Civil Rights Museum now. Visitors see them every day, small, brown, worn, behind glass. The display card reads, worn by Thomas Reed, given away by his son Marcus, kept by Martin Luther King Jr. Light streams through the window, hits the glass just right. The shoes sit there, permanent. The lesson stays. The boy who understood. He just kept walking,